Chapter 1. The flyer was plain. No glitter, no bright fonts. Just a piece of crumpled printer paper tacked to the university bulletin board with a thumbtack in desperation. Community Pottery Club, all levels welcome. No experience necessary, just show up. Rawls stared at it longer than he should have. The no experience line was tempting, and more importantly, it was located in the art annex, on the opposite side of campus from the library. From him. That was all Rawl wanted. A place to hide where he could breathe without the cloying scent of his ex's cologne sneaking up behind him, without hands that touched too much and words that twisted sweetness into obligation. He wasn't there for Clay. He was there for silence. The clubroom sat on the edge of campus, a little too cold, a little too forgotten. High windows, half fogged with dust. Sunlight cut across the floor like angled blades, catching floating particles in gold. The walls smelled faintly of dried earth and kiln heat, warm, ancient, grounding. Rawl liked it immediately. He entered quietly, oversized sweater sleeves covering his wrists, his hair a little unkempt from the wind outside. He scanned the room, counted 6 people. None of them looked like him. None of them stared too long. Good. He picked the furthest wheel in the corner, dropped his bag beside it, and exhaled like he hadn't since the breakup. Or since the thing that wasn't technically a breakup, because how do you break what was never officially labeled? Only manipulated. Touched when convenient. Loved in the shadows. Rawl didn't want to think about that now. That was the point of being here. He stared at the hunk of clay in front of him. Cold, gray. Silent. Just the way he liked it. He didn't know how to wedge it. Didn't know the difference between bisque and bone dry. But no one asked. A few people glanced his way. One girl with spiky bangs waved. Rawl nodded once and looked back at the wheel. Maybe he could just sit. And then the noise arrived. Whoops! Oh no, 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 no! Ah, damn it! It was like an explosion in the quiet. Rawl's head snapped up just in time to catch a splatter of wet clay across the front of his sweater. The wheel beside him spun like a possessed carousel, a cracked lump of misshapen mud flying off its center and thudding dramatically against the table between them. The culprit stood frozen, hands covered in slick brown mess, eyes wide and apologetic. "Oh my God," the boy said. "Did I hit you? Please tell me that didn't hit your face." Rawl looked down at the dark splatter near his stomach. He sighed. "Just the sweater. Shit, I'm so sorry. I swear this wheel hates me every time I think I've got it centered. Boom, explosion." He mimicked a firework with his hands, flinging more clay as he did. "You okay?" Rawl blinked slowly. The boy was tall, wiry. A wild mop of honey-blonde curls perched on his head like he forgot to comb it this year. Dimples punctuated his cheeks every time his face moved, which was a lot, considering the amount of talking he was doing. His shirt had a cracked print of a smiling cartoon mug with the words Potheads Club in faded letters. Rawl said, "It's fine." The boy hesitated. "You're new, right?" "I would have remembered you. I mean, you've got that mysterious artist who broods in the corner vibe going on. Very compelling." Rawl's eyebrow twitched. The boy smiled sheepishly, stepping over the massacre of his own failed creation. "I'm Taylor, disaster potter, recovering from 3 mug fatalities this week, and counting." He reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a wrapped granola bar. "Peace offering?" Taylor held it out like a sacred relic. Rawl stared at it, then at Taylor, then back at the granola bar. "You keep snacks in your pockets?" "You'd be surprised how often I need damage control." Taylor grinned. Rawl reached out slowly, took the bar, and placed it on the table without comment. Taylor nodded, apparently accepting this as a win. He knelt down and began cleaning the ruined clay with practiced chaos. Towels, water, muttered apologies to the floor. Rawl watched him for a moment longer than necessary. Noticed the way Taylor's curls bounced every time he moved, the way his cheeks flushed with effort, the ease with which he laughed at his own failure. Most people would have been embarrassed, flustered. Taylor was glowing, annoying, but oddly comforting. The next 30 minutes passed in relative quiet. Taylor, despite his mug homicide, kept up a one-sided commentary that Rawl mostly tuned out. Not out of dislike, but self-preservation. Talking led to knowing. Knowing led to being seen. Rawl had no interest in being seen. But he couldn't entirely ignore the rhythm Taylor brought into the room. He joked with the club president, a short and terrifying girl named Marta who barked instructions like a drill sergeant. He complimented an older woman's vase like it was a gallery piece. He asked Rawl if he wanted help wedging his clay. Rawl said no. Taylor didn't push. Eventually, the clay in Rawl's hands started to soften under his palms. Not spin, not shape, just soften. He let his fingers press into the cool surface, let the texture fill his skin with something grounding. He wasn't good at this, but it was better than remembering. Better than seeing his ex's text notification flash on his screen just outside the room. Taylor didn't interrupt again, except to loudly drop a tool at one point and yell, "Betrayal!" as if the clay had done it on purpose. Rawl's lips twitched. By the end of the session, his sweater was ruined, his fingers a mess, and his shoulders oddly light. He wiped his hands on a towel, packed up his bag, and stood to leave. Taylor was already gathering his things, a full bag of cracked attempts, one of which resembled a decapitated frog. "Hey," Taylor called, eyes bright. "Same time next week?" Rawl stared. Taylor tilted his head. "You're coming back, right?" Rawl hesitated. He could say no. He could walk out and never return. He could find another place to hide. But his fingers still smelled like clay. His chest felt less tight. And for the first time in weeks, someone had looked at him like he wasn't broken. "Maybe." Taylor grinned like that was a yes. Rawl left the room before he smiled back. Chapter 2. The Mug Graveyard. Rawl had intended to visit the Pottery Club once, maybe twice, just long enough for his ex to forget about him, maybe long enough for the ache to fade into background noise. But 3 weeks in, he had a routine. Every Tuesday and Thursday at 5 p.m., Rawl slipped into the familiar, dusty room at the end of the art annex. He didn't talk much, didn't create much either, just a few lopsided cylinders that refused to resemble anything useful. But he sat and spun and listened, or tried to, because silence had not been in the cards. "Rawl," Taylor called across the room one Thursday evening, "rate this mug on a scale of abstract genius to, did a raccoon make this? Be honest." Rawl looked up from his wheel. Clay squelched between his fingers, refusing to center. Across the room, Taylor held up something that looked like it had once dreamed of being a coffee mug but died halfway there. The handle had collapsed. One side bulged like a tumor. The color, God help it, was a streaky mix of green and orange like Halloween vomit. Rawl said flatly, "It looks like it has a personality disorder." Taylor beamed. "So, 7? He dropped it proudly onto the growing shelf behind him, a shelf already crammed full of similarly tragic pieces, all cracked or crooked or flat-out cursed, the unofficial shrine to his pottery disasters. Rawl had heard someone mutter the name once in passing. The Mug Graveyard. It fit. Taylor, however, was unfazed. He wore failure like a second hoodie, messy, colorful, and oddly charming. Rawl shook his head and returned to his wheel. Clay flew into his hair 30 seconds later. "Damn it, Taylor! Sorry, it's the bowl's fault this time. It attacked me!" The sessions blended together in a kaleidoscope of misfired bowls, half-sung 80s hits, and Taylor narrating every one of his catastrophic attempts like a game show host. Rawl had once told himself he hated chaos, that he needed control, precision, peace. But now he sat beside a human hurricane twice a week, and he kept coming back. Taylor wasn't easy to ignore. Not when he leaned too close and whispered dramatic commentary about the club president's secret pottery mafia. Not when he broke the 4th mug in a row and shouted, "I swear they're plotting against me." Not when he hummed something under his breath and molded a piece with such quiet concentration that Rawl couldn't help watching him from the corner of his eye. "You're staring," Taylor said one day, not looking up. Rawl blinked. "You're talking to your mug again." Taylor glanced at the lopsided cup in his hands. "Yeah, well, it listens better than you," Rawl snorted, a full, unguarded sound that surprised them both. Taylor looked up with a smile. "Was that a laugh? Did I win a prize?" "Don't push it." One day, Taylor's clay base collapsed before he could shape it. Again. "Ugh, I give up," he groaned, slumping over his wheel. "Why can't I get this right? It's literally just a bowl. I eat cereal out of these. I respect bowls. I honor them. Why don't they love me back?" Rawl, trying and failing to ignore him, let out a quiet breath. "You're not centering your clay properly." Taylor perked up. "Oh? Teach me, wise master." "I'm not a master. You're better than me." "That counts." Rawl hesitated, then got up. He stood behind Taylor and reached over, gently placing his hands over Taylor's clay-covered ones. "Like this," he said. "More pressure with your left palm, less with your fingers." Taylor stilled. Rawl didn't realize how close they were until the silence pressed between them like a breath held too long. Their hands were warm, wet, clay slicking every surface between them. Rawl started to pull back, but Taylor smiled, soft and unbothered. "No judgment," he said. "Just trying not to murder my fifth bowl." Rawl nodded, but his chest felt tight for a reason that had nothing to do with pottery. The clubroom had its cast of characters, each one a strange piece of the mismatched puzzle Rawl had accidentally walked into. Marta, the club president, was loud, dry-humored, and wielded a metal rib tool like a weapon. She once told Taylor, "Your mug looks like it's begging for death," then patted his head and called him "sweet idiot." Taylor adored her. Jared was a serious-faced pre-med student with a love for perfect glazing and a painfully obvious crush on Marta. He burned himself twice in 1 week trying to impress her with a double-wall teacup. Leo was the youngest, barely 18, with hair that never behaved and eyes that missed nothing. He spoke maybe 5 words a session, but gave Taylor advice like, "Try letting the clay do what it wants. You're wrestling it." Taylor once whispered to Rawl, "I think Leo is a tiny monk sent to humble me." And then there was Taylor's shelf. The mug graveyard. At least 15 cracked or caved-in pieces, each worse than the last. He refused to throw them out. "They're my kids," he said one evening when Rawl offered to help clean. "They might be hideous, but they're mine." Rawl rolled his eyes but said nothing. He understood the impulse to keep broken things. One Thursday, Rawl forgot his phone. He didn't realize until he was already halfway across campus. With a sigh, he turned back. The clubroom was quiet when he re-entered. Most members had left. The lights were dimmed, but someone was still inside. He paused in the doorway. Taylor stood alone near the mug graveyard, facing the shelf. One hand gently rested on a mug so cracked it looked like it had been dropped multiple times. His voice was soft. "I know you tried," he whispered to it. "I really thought you'd make it through the kiln this time. But hey, at least you're still mine, right?" Rawl stood frozen. Taylor wasn't putting on a show. He didn't know anyone was listening. His voice was low, honest. He brushed his fingers over the handle and said, "One day, I'll make something worth keeping." Rawl felt something in his chest shift. Taylor turned slightly and Rawl ducked back out of the doorway before he was spotted. He walked away without retrieving his phone, but he smiled. For the first time in weeks, it wasn't bitter or forced. It wasn't armor. It was just a smile. Simple, real. He didn't know what it meant, not yet, but he knew he'd be back on Tuesday. Chapter 3. Clay Between the Cracks. The clubroom looked different at night. It was quieter. Still, in a way Rawl hadn't realized he missed. No blaring club playlist, no Marta yelling about glazing mistakes, just the soft hum of the ventilation system, the occasional creak of old pipes, and the low whir of the kiln heating up in the back. Rawl liked it better this way. He hadn't meant to stay late, but one of his cylinders had finally resembled something intentional, and Marta had surprised him by praising the symmetry. That, plus the fact that Taylor had taken up permanent residence on the wheel he originally claimed, made Rawl more determined to carve out his own space. Literally. He didn't even notice Taylor was still there until the guy plopped down on the stool beside him and stole one of his cleanup towels. "You're not sneaking off early for once," Taylor observed, wiping his hands on the already soaked cloth. "I'm both proud and suspicious." Rawl didn't look up from his wheel. "I'm trying to actually finish something tonight." Bold. Very bold. I support this. Rawl finally glanced at him. Taylor was already halfway covered in clay again, a streak across his cheek, his curls even messier than usual. "I thought you left." "I did. Then I remembered I left my hoodie, and my snack bag, and my phone charger, and I got distracted on my way out and started trying to fix one of the mug corpses. Long story short, I live here now." Rawl shook his head. "Figures." Taylor leaned over slightly, watching Rawl's hands with the kind of attention Rawl wasn't used to being on the receiving end of. "You're centering better," Taylor said softly. "Want a tip for refining your base?" Rawl tensed. Taylor noticed, but didn't pull back. He stood behind Rawl, moving slow, his hands hovering just beside Rawl's own. "I won't touch unless you say it's okay." Rawl hesitated, then gave a tiny nod. Warm breath ghosted over his ear as Taylor leaned in, voice gentle. Let your fingers steady, not press. The clay listens better when you're patient. Rawl's pulse jumped. Taylor didn't move, just guided. Their arms didn't quite touch, but the air between them felt charged, intimate. Rawl exhaled slowly and adjusted his fingers. The clay shifted beneath his hands, smoother, less resistant, like it finally understood what it was meant to be. You've got a good feel for it, Taylor said, stepping back without fanfare. I mean, your symmetry still sucks, but that's part of your charm. Rawl gave him a look. You're one cracked handle away from being exiled to the mug graveyard forever. Taylor smirked. Please. I own the mug graveyard. They worked in companionable silence for the next hour, both lost in their own projects. Rawl shaped and reshaped a shallow bowl. Taylor began forming something round and squat, humming quietly to himself as he worked. At some point, the studio lights dimmed automatically, leaving only the desk lamps over each wheel. The room turned soft, shadowed, private. Taylor broke the silence first. His voice wasn't loud this time. No punchline. Just a quiet confession hanging in the dusty air. I flunked out of art school, you know. Rawl looked up. Taylor's gaze was on his piece, fingers smoothing clay that trembled slightly under pressure. Didn't even make it to second semester. Couldn't get the hang of any medium. My instructor said I had energy but no consistency. That's art speak for you're a hot mess. Rawl didn't speak. He didn't need to. Taylor kept going, the words spilling easy, like he'd been waiting for someone to sit still long enough to hear them. I was embarrassed for a long time. Felt like I'd wasted everything. But then I found this little club back home, like this one. The vibe was different. No pressure, just play. No one cared if your stuff cracked or exploded. We just made stuff and laughed about it. His hand stilled. It was the first place I didn't feel like a failure. Rawl watched him carefully. The way his voice dropped, the honesty in it. You're not a failure, Rawl said quietly. Taylor smiled, eyes soft. Tell that to my frog mug. They both laughed. Rawl surprised himself again. The wheel spun down to stillness, and the kiln in the back clicked softly, starting its second fire cycle. Orange glow pulsed faintly behind the heavy metal door. Rawl traced the rim of his bowl. He wasn't sure what pushed him to speak next, but the words came anyway. My ex used to tell me I was convenient. Taylor looked at him. Quiet. Rawl stared at his hands. Said I was good to have around, easy to be with. Said I didn't ask for much, so he didn't feel guilty when he forgot my birthday, or stayed out all night, or didn't introduce me to anyone as anything more than a friend. Taylor's brow furrowed. That's not. I let him, Rawl interrupted, voice calm but tight. I let him because I thought maybe if I made myself smaller, easier, maybe I'd be someone worth keeping. Silence fell again, heavy but not sharp. Taylor didn't reach for him, didn't speak right away. When he did, it was soft. You shouldn't have to earn being kept. Rawl blinked. Taylor wasn't looking at him. He was looking at the clay in his hand, his thumb gently smoothing over a curve like it mattered, like it deserved care even if it was crooked. Neither of them said anything for a long time. Rawl didn't realize how much tension he'd been holding until his shoulders began to ache. Across the table, Taylor lifted his piece, somewhere between a bowl and a stubby cup, and gave it an appraising look. It hadn't cracked. Holy shit, he whispered. It survived. Rawl raised an eyebrow. It's still wet. I know, but usually by this point something snapped. It's a miracle. Rawl leaned closer. You think it's because you stopped yelling at it? Taylor grinned. No, it's because I had a good vibe nearby. You're secretly my luck charm. Please don't say that in public. Taylor snickered and pulled a small tray toward him. Okay, pottery prodigy. Come help me glaze it before the curse comes back. They worked side by side, Rawl showing Taylor how to dip, how to rotate without streaks, how to keep the glaze even. Their arms bumped occasionally. Neither moved away. Eventually, Taylor pulled out his phone and handed Rawl one side of his earbuds. Music? Rawl hesitated, then nodded. The song was soft, acoustic, familiar but unplaceable. They glazed in rhythm with the melody, two sets of hands moving in quiet sync. No chaos, no mess. Just warmth and shared space and the sound of something unfinished becoming something whole. When they finished, Taylor held up the newly glazed piece like a crown. She's beautiful, he declared. She's lumpy, Rawl corrected. Beauty is subjective, Taylor said. then turned to Rawl, smile fading into something gentler. Would you keep something I made? The question landed somewhere deep. Rawl looked at the squat little mug, then at Taylor, who was pretending to be casual but whose hands had gone still. Rawl didn't say anything, but he nodded. Taylor's smile this time wasn't big or goofy. It was quiet, genuine. Rawl looked away quickly, but not before Taylor saw the blush rise to his cheeks. The off-campus Pottery Fair took place every year at the edge of the historic district, tucked between a vintage bookstore and a family-run cafe that smelled like cinnamon and sun-warmed bread. Folding tables lined the sidewalks, each one overflowing with color-splashed ceramics, handmade jewelry, and all the artistic ambition the university had to offer. The community buzzed with life, children dragging parents to the face-painting booth, couples browsing bowls they'd never use, and students trading compliments for confidence. Warm autumn light bathed everything in a glow that made even the chipped pieces look charming. Rawl stood behind the Pottery Club's booth, already regretting his choice to participate. Too many people. Too many eyes. He kept adjusting the row of mugs and bowls they'd brought to sell, not because they needed fixing, but because it gave his hands something to do. "You're doing that thing again," Taylor said beside him, nudging his elbow. Rawl blinked. "What thing?" "The anxious rearranging. You've moved that mug 6 times in 3 minutes. Any more and it's going to file a harassment complaint." Rawl rolled his eyes, but his lips twitched. Taylor was wearing his usual chaos chic ensemble, a striped shirt covered in suspicious glaze stains, jeans with a hole in the knee, and a backwards cap that somehow made him look even more like someone who spilled paint for a living. His booth display, unsurprisingly, was a disaster of form and function. Mugs shaped like squished toads, bowls that leaned like they were mid-swoon, a teapot so lumpy someone had already asked if it was organic sculpture. And yet, Taylor stood proudly next to them like they were rare artifacts. Rawl's table, in contrast, was neat and minimal. Clean lines, muted tones. A single mug at the front with a slight ridge pressed in along the side, his own fingerprint, accidentally left behind during glazing and now baked permanently into the surface. It sold within 15 minutes. Rawl barely had time to react before Taylor whooped and clapped him on the back. "That's my boy. You're officially a professional potter now." "It was one mug," Rawl said. "One mug that made a lady go ooh and hand us money. I call that a win." Taylor beamed. "I'm so proud of you. I could cry into my lopsided gravy boats." Rawl glanced at Taylor's table. "That one doesn't look terrible." Taylor followed his gaze. "You mean the blob with the star-shaped hole? That's supposed to be a vase." "It's intentionally abstract," Taylor gasped. "High praise coming from the Stoic Master himself." Rawl shrugged, but the smile tugging at the corner of his mouth wouldn't quite go away. The fair continued with warmth and laughter, punctuated by the occasional customer wandering through to admire, or gently mock, Taylor's creations. Marta and Jared ran the payment table with brutal efficiency, Marta barking prices, while Jared kept glancing at her like she'd hung the moon. Leo had arrived, muttered something about glaze chemistries, and then disappeared into the crowd like a pottery ghost. For a while, Rawl allowed himself to relax. The mug had sold. Taylor was in his usual orbit of loud kindness. And the breeze carried just enough warmth to make Rawl feel, if not happy, then less guarded. Until he saw him, Rawl froze. Across the street near the cafe stood a figure he hadn't seen in weeks, but had felt in every muscle of his spine. Slouched posture, familiar leather jacket, a casual smile that always looked rehearsed. His ex, Dorian. The man hadn't changed, still effortlessly handsome, still effortlessly fake. And now he was walking toward the booth, confidence in every step, like nothing had happened. Rawl's pulse spiked. "Rawl?" Dorian said when he reached them, tone too light. "Wow, I didn't think I'd find you here." Rawl's throat tightened, his fingers curled around the edge of the table. Taylor, who'd been stacking another one of his misshapen mugs into a display pyramid, looked up. Dorian tilted his head, eyes flicking from Rawl's face to the booth. "So, pottery. Didn't think this was your thing." Rawl didn't respond. Dorian's smile widened. "I was just in the area. Thought maybe we could grab coffee, talk a little, catch up?" He reached out and placed a hand on Rawl's arm. The touch made Rawl flinch. Taylor moved faster than Rawl could think. One smooth step between them, body blocking Rawl's like a shield. His voice wasn't loud, but it was firm, sharp. He's not alone anymore. Dorian's smile cracked for a second. And you are. Someone who doesn't like seeing people touched without consent. Taylor said, I'd step back now. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Dorian laughed, awkward, dismissive. Sure, whatever. Good luck with your little clay club. He turned and walked off, disappearing into the fair crowd like a smudge erased from a painting. Rawl was still frozen. Taylor turned, his face softer now. Hey, you okay? Rawl couldn't speak. His hands were shaking. Okay, we're taking a break, Taylor said, grabbing Rawl's elbow gently. Come on. They ducked behind the booth, settling onto the grass near the back wall of the bookstore. It was quieter here, tucked away from the street noise and the colorful chaos. Rawl sat down hard, breathing shallow. Taylor knelt beside him, but didn't crowd him. Sorry, he said quietly. I didn't mean to jump in like that. He looked like the kind of guy who makes you feel smaller when he talks. Rawl didn't answer. He just closed his eyes. Taylor stayed still for a moment, then sat down beside him, knees touching. Not quite leaning in, but there, solid, warm. You don't have to tell me what happened, Taylor said softly. Just let me sit here with you. Rawl didn't mean to rest his head against Taylor's shoulder, but he did. And Taylor didn't move, he just let Rawl lean. A long breath shuddered out of Rawl's lungs. The tension in his shoulders cracked just a little. You're better than silence, Rawl whispered. Taylor tilted his head, resting it gently against Rawl's. Silence has nothing on me. They stayed like that for a while, the noise of the fair fading behind them, the sun dipping low enough to cast golden light between the trees. And for once, Rawl didn't feel like he had to explain his bruises to be held. Chapter 5. We were supposed to be just clay friends. The mug was hideous. It tilted to one side like it was trying to escape itself, and the glaze had dripped in unpredictable swirls, somehow glossy and matte in the same breath. The handle looked like it had been glued on by an optimistic toddler. Rawl stared at it as Taylor placed it in his hands with great ceremony. For your tea, Taylor said, beaming. Or your pencils. Or your secrets. It's multi-purpose. Rawl blinked down at it. You glazed it blue. It's your color. Quiet, but solid. I'm not sure if that's a compliment. Taylor shrugged. It is if I say it is. They were in the clubroom after hours again. The kiln had just finished its slow roaring cycle, and Marta had opened it like a sacred tomb. Most of the club's pieces were intact. Taylor had hovered near the back, visibly sweating, waiting to see if the squat little mug he'd made would survive. And somehow, it had. Rawl cradled the mug in his palms, hesitant. It was ugly. Unapologetically so. But it was warm from the kiln and rough where Taylor's fingerprints had left small imperfections. It was real, and he couldn't stop looking at it. Later that night, Rawl found himself walking beside Taylor under the soft glow of streetlights. Their shoulders brushed occasionally. Neither moved away. Come over, Taylor said casually, hands stuffed into his hoodie pocket. I've got terrible wine, a backlog of Pottery fail videos, and way too many snack options. We can pretend to be adults for an evening. Rawl hesitated. Taylor looked at him sideways. Zero pressure. You can bail any time, but I figured we survived a fair and a mug miracle. Might as well celebrate. Rawl nodded slowly. Okay, yeah, sure. Taylor grinned, eyes crinkling. Prepare to be amazed by the chaos that is my living room. Chaos was an understatement. Taylor's apartment was small and lived in, with mismatched throw pillows, a lava lamp that may or may not have been haunted, and shelves lined with rejected pottery experiments, many of which leaned suspiciously or doubled as pen holders. A broken mug sat on the kitchen counter with a plant growing from it. The plant looked healthier than anything Rawl had managed to keep alive. Make yourself at home, Taylor said, tossing his keys in a bowl shaped like a melting sun. Couch is cleanish. Mostly. Ignore the glitter. I had a crafting phase. Rawl laughed despite himself and dropped onto the floor instead, legs crossed, back against the couch. This is somehow exactly how I pictured your apartment. Taylor dropped down beside him with 2 cheap bottles of wine and a bag of sour gummy worms. They didn't bother with glasses. The video playlist was mostly clay disasters, wheels flinging bowls into walls, instructors screaming in slow motion, one guy who accidentally set his sleeve on fire mid-throw. Rawl laughed so hard at that one he snorted. Taylor paused the video. That! Right there! That sound! I want that in my pocket. Rawl flushed. What sound? Your laugh. Taylor leaned his head back against the couch. It's rare. Feels like a win every time I get it. Rawl stared down at the mug in his hands, the same one Taylor had given him earlier, now cool and solid in his lap. He said quietly, I don't trust easily. Taylor didn't speak. Rawl continued, slower this time. I never have. And after everything, I kind of trained myself not to. But you don't ask for anything. You don't take anything. It's like you don't need anything back from me. Taylor turned his head, looking at him fully now. Rawl swallowed. And that scares me. Silence stretched between them. Then Taylor said, That's not true. Rawl looked up. Taylor's voice was warm, soft. I want something. What? I want your laugh, he said. I want your quiet. I want your stubborn. I want the way you say things like they don't matter when they do. I want to be someone you don't have to flinch away from. Rawl felt breathless. Taylor reached out, slow and careful, like he was offering not a touch but a choice. Rawl took it. Their fingers threaded together. The kiss wasn't dramatic. It didn't crash or demand. It just happened. Soft, slow, tasting faintly of wine and nerves. Taylor's hand found the side of Rawl's neck, his thumb brushing the curve of his jaw. Rawl leaned in closer, clutching Taylor's hoodie like he was scared the moment might slip away. The second kiss was deeper, hungrier. Their mouths fit with a kind of relief neither of them knew they needed. Taylor's other hand slid beneath Rawl's sweater, resting on the bare skin of his hip. Rawl gasped, quiet and vulnerable, and Taylor pulled back just far enough to whisper, Okay? Rawl nodded, flushed and breathless. Yeah, more than okay. They didn't make it to the couch. Shirts disappeared in slow, deliberate movements. Legs tangled on the floor between pillows and candy wrappers. Taylor kissed Rawl's shoulder, then the hollow of his throat. Rawl let his fingers roam, exploring ribs and spine and the small mole near Taylor's waist. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't loud. It was the sound of quiet gasps. Breath hitching. A low moan swallowed in a kiss, hands holding like promises instead of possession. They moved beneath a blanket pulled from the couch, their bodies wrapped around each other like clay on a wheel, soft, spinning, inevitable. After, they lay tangled in the aftermath. Taylor's fingers traced small circles on Rawl's back, slow and grounding. Rawl buried his face against Taylor's shoulder, heartbeat steadying. Then he heard the whisper. You're not a backup plan, Taylor said. You're everything I didn't know I needed. Rawl didn't answer, but he held Taylor tighter. Chapter 6. I think I'm really good at loving you. The final session of the year buzzed with energy. The clubroom, usually quiet and full of spinning wheels and muttered curses, had been transformed into something festive and bright. Streamers hung from the high beams, clay-dusted tables were pushed to the sides, and finished projects, glazed, fired, and proud, lined the room like strange mismatched trophies. Rawl stood near the back, watching people laugh and hug and shout over one another. Taylor had disappeared somewhere near the snack table after yelling, I smell cheese cubes, and hadn't been seen since. Rawl looked down at the sculpture he'd placed on the display shelf just minutes ago. It was his last piece, his most personal one. 2 hands, detailed but slightly abstracted, gently cupping a small lopsided mug. The hands curved protectively around the cup, as if offering it to the world, or shielding it from it. The glaze was soft, muted, warm, a quiet contrast to Taylor's signature color explosions. He hadn't told anyone what it meant, but when Marta passed by and stared at it for a long moment, she said softly, That's love. That's what it looks like when you choose someone who's a little cracked and hold them like they matter. Rawl didn't reply, but his heart clenched in a way that told him she was exactly right. The end-of-year speeches began with Leo grunting something about hoping no one blows up the kiln next term, and Jared nervously asking Marta out in the middle of his farewell message, causing her to blink, mutter, finally, and grab his collar for a kiss that made the entire club whoop and cheer. Then it was Marta's turn. She stood in front of the group, arms crossed, already scowling affectionately. All right, nerds. You made it through another year of clay-stained disasters and emotional breakthroughs disguised as art therapy. I'm proud of most of you. Laughter rippled through the group. She pointed at Taylor. Except you. You still don't know how to center a ball of clay without offending it. Taylor bowed dramatically. And yet here I am, beloved and thriving. Then Marta pointed at Roll. And you, our mysterious recluse turned pottery god, managed to sneak in, emotionally shut down, steal our hearts, and start sculpting feelings like some kind of poetic ninja. Raoul blinked. What? I ship you both, Marta said, completely serious. Chaos and calm, it's giving balance. Taylor whooped and threw an arm around Raoul's shoulders. You hear that? We're aesthetic. Raoul's face went red, but he didn't shrug the arm off. When the cheers died down, Taylor reached into his oversized tote bag and pulled out something wrapped in a ridiculous amount of tissue paper and duct tape. I made you something, he said, suddenly bashful. It's terrible. You're welcome. Raoul eyed the package with suspicion. Is it ticking? Only with love. Raoul peeled away the layers, the room going quiet with curiosity. When the last bit of duct tape gave way, he stared down at what could only be described as a mug in theory. It was something. The glaze was a swirl of unholy colors, teal, mustard, fuchsia, and the handle was attached upside down. Raoul started laughing. A breathless, chest-shaking, face-burning laugh that filled the room and cracked something loose inside him. What is this? He managed. It's U-shaped chaos, Taylor declared proudly, with the emotional stability of a wet spaghetti noodle. Raoul kept laughing, then realized something was rattling inside the mug. He tilted it and found a folded note nestled at the bottom. His smile faltered, gentled. He pulled it open. I may be bad at pottery, but I think I'm really good at loving you. Raoul went very still. Then he looked up. Taylor was watching him with that same soft expression, nervous and open and unguarded. Raoul didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, cupped Taylor's face with one clay-dusted hand, and kissed him. Right there, in front of everyone. Taylor melted into it immediately, his arms winding around Raoul's waist, their bodies close, mouths slow and certain. A wave of cheers erupted, someone shouted, "Finally!" And Marta was definitely recording the entire thing on her phone while pretending not to smile like a dork. Raoul pulled away only slightly, forehead resting against Taylor's. You're the worst Potter I've ever met, he whispered. Taylor grinned. But the best kisser you've had tonight? Top 3, Raoul teased. Taylor poked him in the ribs. Rude. Later, the noise faded behind them as they stumbled through Taylor's front door, hands still tangled, laughter still spilling between kisses. Inside, the apartment was a little warmer than usual, probably because the windows had been left cracked open, but neither of them moved to fix it. Instead, they collapsed onto the bed without bothering to undress fully, a tangle of limbs and fabric and breath. The ugly mug sat on the nightstand, still faintly warm from where Raoul had held it all night. His fingers brushed it once as he lay back, then found their way to Taylor's hand, threading through instinctively. Taylor pulled the quilt over both of them, their legs tangled naturally, knees brushing, hips close. The weight of the year fell away. The first touch, the awkward glances, the broken mugs, the quiet nights by the kiln. All of it had led here, to this moment, this softness. Taylor kissed his forehead, barely more than a brush of lips. Raoul smiled, not the careful kind, not the polite one, but wide and unguarded, the kind that reached his eyes and stayed there. He looked at Taylor, the man who had offered him lopsided kindness and space, without demands. The man who had laughed at broken things and taught Raoul how to love them too. I came here to disappear, Raoul said quietly, but you made me feel seen. Taylor's hand tightened around his. And I'll keep looking, he whispered, voice low and full of promise. Every day until you believe it.